Ну, сейчас, отвечая на этот вопрос, я не хочу открывать двери для всяких раздоров между нашими народами. Но посмотрим. У меня бой впереди тяжелый. После этого посмотрим.
I saw Khamzat said easiest way to pound for pound #1 is to fight Islam. How do you think that fight would play out?
Khamzat is in middleweight.
Well, I think Islam said before that he wants to go to middleweight.
I don't think this is possible. Think about from UFC perspective. Let's say I fight Cody Sahagan, 6 months later, if I fight for the 145 belt. If I win this belt, then I need another 6 months to defend my belt. This is 1 year later in my weight class, and I need another 6 months to defend another belt. I'm holding divisions. That's why I don't think UFC would like to have
Makhachev at 170.
We'll see who is gonna be the champ there, but I don't know. It's the fastest way if the guy wins the fight, fastest way to get the pound to pound. #1.
Khamzat said that he'd be interested to potentially move back down to welterweight. And obviously Islam's moving up to welterweight. He's having this blockbuster fight with JDM. But have you thought about how big a Islam Khamzat fight could potentially be? Super fight down the line, that would be massive.
And this will never happen. First of all, Khamzat is too big. I don't think they can ever make welterweight. They know each other. They're from the same region. These fights make absolutely no sense. Khamzat has so many contenders to clean out the division before even he thinking about going to different division. And I think he will defend this title. But, and it's gonna, every guy's gonna bring a different challenge.
Сейчас, отвечая на этот вопрос, я не хочу открывать двери для всяких раздоров между нашими народами. Но посмотрим. У меня бой впереди тяжелый. После этого посмотрим.
I saw Khamzat said easiest way to pound for pound #1 is to fight Islam. How do you think that fight would play out?
Khamzat is in middleweight.
Well, I think Islam said before that he wants to go to middleweight.
I don't think this is possible. Think about from UFC perspective. Let's say I fight Cody Sahagan, 6 months later, if I fight for the 145 belt. If I win this belt, then I need another 6 months to defend my belt. This is 1 year later in my weight class, and I need another 6 months to defend another belt. I'm holding divisions. That's why I don't think UFC would like to have.
Islam goes on and says, I don't want to fight Khamzat Chimaev. I don't want to open any door of conflict between our people. I beat Jack Della Maddalena. I would then want to fight Ilia Topuria. That's my preferred super fight. So Islam Makhachev goes and becomes the welterweight champion. His eyes are now set on Ilia Topuria at 155.
The MMA world has been buzzing with speculation about a potential clash between Islam Makhachev and Khamzat Chimaev, two dominant forces who represent different divisions but share an aura of invincibility that fans can't stop talking about. The idea of them stepping into the octagon together is as wild as it is intriguing, and while many believe it's a dream matchup that could define an era, the reality is much more complicated. Still, the conversations surrounding it are what make this sport so fascinating, because every comment, every rumor, and every interview adds another layer of intrigue to an already massive storyline. It all started when Chimaev boldly stated that the easiest path to pound for pound #1 status would be to fight Islam. That comment alone lit a fire in the MMA community, because here you had a fighter who already looks like a monster at middleweight, suggesting that he could cut down or meet Islam somewhere in between for the ultimate showdown. But when Islam himself was asked about the idea, he poured cold water on the excitement, saying he didn't think it made sense from the UFC's perspective. He explained that holding multiple belts across different divisions would freeze things up for too long, delaying defenses and leaving divisions without active champions for over a year. From his point of view, the UFC simply wouldn't allow it. Despite Islam's skepticism, Khamzat hasn't exactly backed down. He suggested there might be a world where he could make welterweight again, putting himself on a collision course with Islam if the Dagestani star moves up. That possibility alone has people wondering whether the UFC could eventually see it as a blockbuster opportunity too big to pass up. After all, these are two fighters with completely different styles, but equally terrifying reputations. And fans can't help but imagine what would happen if their paths really did cross. The hype is undeniable, even if the logistics are messy. Adding another voice to the debate, Ali Abdelaziz, Islam's manager, flat out dismissed the idea, saying it makes no sense at all. From his perspective, Khamzat is far too big to realistically make welterweight again. And besides, he already has plenty of contenders to deal with at middleweight. Abdelaziz stressed that both fighters come from the same region, and he doesn't see any reason to push for a matchup that could create unnecessary conflict. For him, It's not only about weight classes, but also about keeping things respectful between people who share cultural ties. His view was clear: let Khamzat dominate his division, while Islam handles his own business elsewhere. But of course, speculation doesn't stop with one dismissal. Khamzat himself has left the door open, claiming he could still make welterweight if the opportunity was right. That statement fueled even more talk, because if Islam becomes champion at 170 pounds, the storyline writes itself. You would have two of the most feared grapplers in the world facing off for supremacy. A fight that would instantly headline any card and probably shatter pay-per-view numbers. Fans crave those kinds of matchups where there's no obvious outcome, and Islam versus Khamzat fits perfectly into that category. Yet Islam himself has made it clear that he doesn't want disputes between his people and Khamzat's. He has said repeatedly that his focus is on the fights directly in front of him, like his matchup with Jack Della Maddalena. Only after that will he think about what comes next. And even then, when he talks about dream super fights, his attention turns not to Khamzat but to Ilia Topuria, the rising star who just captured the imagination of fans with his explosive performances. Islam revealed that if he were to beat Jack and secure the welterweight belt, his preferred mega fight would be against Topuria rather than Chimaev. That alone was a twist nobody saw coming, shifting the conversation from one massive hypothetical fight to another. The idea of Islam versus Topuria instantly sparked its own debate. Many analysts pointed out that Topuria has proven himself at featherweight and now lightweight, showing knockout power and elite skills, but the size difference is undeniable. Islam is considered a big lightweight, and even at welterweight, his grappling makes him one of the strongest fighters in the world. Still, Topuria's precision striking and ability to capitalize on openings make him a dangerous opponent for anyone. Some fighters like Michael Chandler argued that Islam's size and experience would likely be too much for Ilia, while others like Jorge Masvidal went the opposite way, saying they'd bet everything on Topuria because of his defensive wrestling and knockout power. That range of opinions shows just how evenly balanced fans see that potential fight. Even Joe Rogan weighed in, saying that Topuria deserves a lightweight title shot and that if anyone has earned the right to challenge Islam, it's him. Rogan pointed out that Topuria's victories over names like Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski put him in rare company, and from his perspective, the UFC has no choice but to set that fight up sooner rather than later. Chael Sonnen, on the other hand, took a more skeptical stance, saying that cutting back down to 155 has always been Islam's biggest struggle. For him, the idea of Islam moving back down after establishing himself at welterweight feels unrealistic. Sonnen suggested that the only way the fight happens is if Islam loses at 170 and decides to return to lightweight, which puts the chances of the matchup in serious doubt. But fans don't necessarily care about the roadblocks. What keeps them engaged is the what-if scenarios, the dream matchups that fuel endless debates online. Whether it's Islam versus Khamzat or Islam versus Topuria, both ideas carry the weight of being era-defining fights. On one hand, you'd see the clash of two grappling titans with size and power like no other. On the other, well, you'd have a matchup between a dominant champion and a fast-rising star with the kind of striking that could shock the world. Both options are fascinating, and both keep fans hooked on every update. Other fighters have also thrown their thoughts into the mix. Dustin Poirier, for instance, called the idea of Topuria moving up to 170 to face Islam a stretch, highlighting the size difference again. But he didn't dismiss Topuria's chances entirely, acknowledging that his knockout power and technique could make him dangerous even against bigger opponents. Max Holloway added that if Topuria keeps winning, it'll be impossible to deny him a shot, and he admitted he'd love to see such a fight himself. Even Jan Blachowicz praised the potential matchup, though he firmly believes Islam is in his prime and almost unstoppable right now. Then there are those who see it differently, like Pat Downey, who bluntly said Khamzat would smash Islam simply because of the size disparity. His view is that the fight would be unfair, with Chimaev's length and strength overwhelming Makhachev. Statements like that ignite even more conversation, because for every analyst who says Islam's technique and discipline can neutralize bigger opponents, There's someone else arguing that raw size and aggression would make the difference. That push and pull dynamic is exactly why people stay glued to these debates. Other fighters like Beneil Dariush and Aaron Pico have acknowledged the skill of both men, saying Islam's mix of grappling and striking could give him the edge, but not ruling out the possibility of Topuria shocking the world. Even Colby Covington chimed in, suggesting that Islam looked beatable in his last performance and that Topuria could pull off the upset. When you have so many respected voices disagreeing, it creates an even bigger sense of anticipation, because nobody really knows how it would play out. At the heart of all this speculation is Islam himself, who has consistently shown that he is not just another champion, but one of the most calculated and disciplined fighters in the sport. His insistence on not creating unnecessary conflict, his strategic way of looking at potential matchups, and his focus on the immediate challenge in front of him all reflect a fighter who knows exactly how to manage both his career and his legacy. He isn't reckless in chasing headlines or calling out names for hype. Instead, he lets the results speak and allows the intrigue to build naturally around him. Khamzat, by contrast, thrives on bold statements and fearless challenges, the kind of energy that electrifies fans and draws attention instantly. The collision of these two personalities, even just in words, is enough to captivate the sport. Whether the fight ever happens or not almost doesn't matter, because the conversations it sparks are already shaping the way fans look at the future of MMA. Add in Topuria's rise and the possibility of him entering this picture, and you have a triangle of super fights that could define the next few years of the UFC. One thing is certain, whether it's Islam versus Khamzat, Islam versus Topuria, or some other clash of champions, the appetite for these mega fights has never been stronger. The fans want to see something that feels bigger than belts, something that feels like history in the making. And while weight classes, scheduling, and UFC politics might delay or even prevent some of these matchups, the speculation alone is enough to keep people watching, waiting, and debating non-stop. Because in a sport where one punch, one takedown, or one mistake can change everything, the possibilities are endless, and that's what makes imagining fights like these so irresistible.